let's go ahead and get started. We would really like to welcome and thank Doodle Labs for their support of today's webinar.
Thanks so much, Shannon. I really appreciate it. Again, I'm Nate Lipka. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager for Doodle Labs. I'm very happy to moderate today's webinar, Ensuring Connectivity for the Growing Blue UAS Cleared List. Thanks again to AVSI for hosting another webinar with Doodle Labs. I've actually moderated 2 prior Doodle Labs webinars with both AVSI and the Defense Innovation Unit. The first, we gave a bit of an overview on how Doodle Labs came to land on the Blue UAS Framework Cleared Components list in the first place. And the second, we staged with a group of other Blue cleared component providers who have helped to build out the Blue ecosystem. So today really marks the perfect opportunity to jump back in, talk about Blue directly with DIU and some of the key insiders who've since joined the ranks of the Blue UAS cleared list. There's been quite a few recent developments within and around the program, so today's session comes at exactly the right time. One, that both PDW and Freefly's flagship drone platforms have been added to the Blue UAS cleared list. We'll check in with leaders from both companies, get some intel on their new technology, and some insight into what joining the Blue ecosystem has meant to their businesses. We'll also zero in on connectivity challenges these platforms face in the field and how both companies turn to Doodle Labs for resilient, long-range, high-throughput data link with anti-jamming capabilities. We'll also talk about how DIU has launched its now in progress, first ever Blue UAS Refresh Challenge, an open call for new and different commercial drone advancements to be used by the Department of Defense, and an opportunity to shake up the list, welcome new platforms and components of all types into the Blue ecosystem, and a push to increase UAS optionality for DoD end users. And lastly, we'll look ahead to what the future of the Blue program may hold, what type of impact the program may already be having outside of the DoD and other federal agencies, and even in non-governmental commercial and industrial spaces. Just a quick hi to each of the panelists, no particular order here. Dylan Ham, CTO at PDW. PDW's C100 was added to the Blue UAS cleared list in late 2023. Hi, Dylan.
Hello.
We have Matt Eisenbarger, CRO for Freefly Systems. Freefly's Alta X is Blue cleared, and their latest platform, the Astro Prime, just joined the Blue list earlier this year. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Nate. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Amol Parikh, co-CEO of Doodle Labs, whose Helix Mesh Rider radio has long been a mainstay on the Blue UAS Framework Cleared Components list, and is on both of the platforms that I just mentioned prior. Hi, Amol.
Hey, Nate.
And last but not least, Trent Emenecker, Project Manager for Autonomy for Defense Innovation Unit. Hi, Trent. I think you're muted there, Trent.
4 years of virtual meetings, and I still can't get right at the beginning. Thanks for the time, Nate, AVSI, and everybody on the line. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Awesome, Trent. Good time to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what your role at DIU entails and what you're working on?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I am the day-to-day project leader for the Blue UAS project. So anything that comes within kind of that overall administration, Blue UAS framework, I am the PM for that. What I am not the decision maker. I'm not the gatekeeper on what comes on and off. I work in that process. I, give feedback and input, but there's a board that makes those collective decisions, as well as things like that are done in partnership with our DoD partners. So just as a brief bit of context there, I also work in multiple other project areas within DIU, but my primary focus is on Blue.
So I can't promise we won't get any questions or requests for insider information from you. We won't necessarily voice those aloud on the call, but can you give a little bit of an overview of kind of the current state and structure of Blue UAS program?
Yeah, so we have partners on the line who've been part of Blue for a long time, so I know they understand and have their own perspectives. What Blue UAS is one of 3 pathways to bring commercial drone technology into DoD. You can bring that in through a traditional program of record, but we all know those take a long time. They lag end user demands, and they're just not being delivered in the capacity that we need. Folks can also come into DoD through an exception to policy, where paperwork is done by whoever wants to buy that platform or capability. What the Blue list is a third pathway. And since it's been started to now, we want to find and partner with commercial firms who have capabilities for technology that's ready today, that meets an actual warfighter end user demand. And then we want to bring those in on a commercial time frame. We define that as 60 days or less. Have we always met that time frame? No. But right now, that's about the time frame we're at to add a full platform. And for components and capabilities to our framework expansion, we're at about 30 days. At a high level, though, over the past 6 months, we've separated Blue into really two things: the Blue UAS list, which are all the flying platforms, and then the Blue UAS framework, which are the enabling capabilities, software, sensors, gimbals, radios, our Doodle Labs partner here, that go into making platforms successful. That's both to increase some optionality for folks, to provide a little bit of certainty in the marketplace, but is also a direct result of end user feedback. Our end users want to know things they can put on their platforms that are valid under the law. That's why we do our NDA compliance and our cybersecurity inspections. So we now have within DoD the requirement to operate a platform is an ATO, an authority to operate. Our ATOs are now global, meaning any platform on the Blue list can be used anywhere in the world with no additional paperwork. And anything on our Blue UAS framework that's compatible with a flying platform can be used in an interoperable manner without doing any additional paperwork. So those are things that we're doing in response to end user needs. Some feedback we've gotten from our commercial partners. We're doing things like cutting down our time for software approvals. Last time I checked, about 2 weeks ago, we were at 30 days. That's still not good enough, but we're cutting that down from what was 60 about 6 months ago. You can compare that to a program of record that's more like 12 months for a software update. And then the big thing that we've recently done is our Blue UAS Refresh. We launched that a little more than a month ago. That solicitation closed about 2.5 weeks ago. We had 360 separate submissions, more than 220 distinct companies. So some companies submitted multiple ideas. Vast increase over anything we've ever received at DIU before, more than double any previous Blue UAS list. And it speaks to the depth of the market and the demand from commercial partners to unleash their capabilities for the DoD. So what we're doing right now with that, we have a list of about 45 evaluators who are evaluating companies to determine who's going to be invited to the test event, where the potential option for inclusion on the Blue list is going to be the end result. No one is going to be guaranteed a spot because we do still have to verify compliance with the law and conduct a cybersecurity analysis of anyone we do designate as winners. But our intent is going forward that we'll do this on an annual basis. And that's to induce some market competition and to directly reflect end user needs. This is a space where things change all the time, and end user problem statements do as well. So we want to provide a little more market-based flexibility there. And with that, I'll pause, Nate, and see if you have follow-up questions or want to move to somebody else.
Yeah, what was your reaction to that response? You mentioned like depth of the market as being a contributing factor. What do you think that response, and we were on the call with everyone feverishly asking questions about the program and getting clarity, and there was a really big turnout. What does it say about the market, but also about maybe perception and reception of Blue UAS in general?
So I'll hit the perception of Blue UAS in general first. Number one, we collaborate with AUVSI a lot. And I want to say that the AUVSI Green List looks at the same things that we do for the Blue List. They do the same compliance with the law. They do the same cybersecurity piece. And so from a stamp of approval on, is this a safe, valid thing to go and use and operate? It's the same thing. Now, DoD doesn't recognize the Green List, but that's something that we want to raise the standard in the market. We want better products. We want a higher quality, more cybersecure. Everyone wants that. AUVSI has really been a great partner in helping push that forward with our Green project. Were we surprised at the number of responses we got? Internally, the team, we were taking bets on how many we were going to get. I was like, what I put in writing was between 350 and 400. So I'm not going to take credit for being right, but we had folks think we were going to get 150. We knew the market was there. We knew the demand to compete and to gain a chance to enter the Blue List was there and to provide solutions, which we clearly saw. And part of the reason, though, is the Blue List today consists of framework components, but only of Group 1 and Group 2 platforms. End user demand tells us that we need to expand that. So we also opened it up and solicited proposals for FPVs and Group 3 platforms. Slightly smaller segments of the market on either end, but we want to expand because our DoD partners need more options. They were clear about what they needed, and we're trying to provide that.
That's great. And I definitely want to circle back around a little bit later in the session to talk a little bit more specifically about the test event and getting technology in the hands of DoD end users. But I think this would be a good segue to actually jump in and talk about some of the fun stuff, which is the technology and some of the new stuff that's coming to market. So we have a couple slides to share to kind of give an overview from some of our panelists. I want to pull in Amol Parikh from Doodle Labs to start. Hi, Amol. I know there's a direct through line for Doodle Labs through really all of the offerings and the products back to some initial development of mesh rider radio for the DoD, for Blue UAS, and for DIU specifically. Can you kind of give us an overview of what we're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So our mesh rider radio lineup are NDA compliant high performance data links that we designed specifically for enterprise and defense drone and other robotics networks. We partnered with DIU several years ago and actually developed the Helix configuration of our mesh rider radio in that mini, which is the second from the left. For us, it was taking in those requirements that were being given to us by DIU for the early stages of the Blue UAS framework. And we were actually able to take that and, we saw their frequency designations that they wanted us to design towards, covered from 1.6 gigahertz up to 2.5 gigahertz. There's 6 frequency bands in between. We were actually able to take those requirements and both look to meet them in the moment, but also try to future-proof the platform by bringing that towards what we saw things would need to go forward. And so for us, that was actually developing our first round of a multi-band radio, moving from single frequency bands per radio that were form factor optimized. You could drop and replace them, but now you had one radio that actually covered multiple frequency bands. Think of it as more tools in your toolkit. And then we also took what we had as our mesh rider platform at the time and further swapped, optimize it, size, weight, and power consumption, optimized towards those drone applications. For us, what that really allowed us to do is then really understand better the drone requirements that we were already working with, but through these kind of requirements that were given to us through DIU and the Blue UAS framework, which allowed us to then expand further, into those other form factors that you see there, all different kinds of parts of a robotics network that we're starting to think about, smaller platforms with the Nano, other larger platforms with the Mini and the OEM that need to go further ranges, even the wearable that works really well with, ground control stations. What we then also were able to do is push into other frequency bands, and just continue to work with, our amazing partners like Freefly and PDW that have joined us on this panel, understand from them, their unique requirements as they focus on defense applications, commercial applications. What are they facing in terms of the different frequency bands that they're using, whether unlicensed or not, urban environments, battlefields, and then getting to build upon our solution for them. Even taking things like that multi-band capability, bringing it forward to being able to dynamically and actively use that based on how you're deploying. We do that through something called Sense, which is our active interference agility that allows you to now navigate between the channels of a band or different frequency bands altogether. So for us, this has actually been like our story working alongside DIU, Blue UAS, all of the drone partners that are actually on the program as well. It's been really incredible. It's been really rising over the last couple of years and something that I'm proud to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think on the next slide, we zero in on the mini form factor, which is the one at play here in both the PDW and Freefly platforms. I want to ask you for an overview on that, but also sort of what was it coming from a commercial space, diving headfirst and developing solutions specifically to meet Blue UAS standards for DoD. What were the biggest challenges of making that transition? What were some of the biggest surprises of developing that technology?
For us, I don't know if it was necessarily surprises, but I guess the challenges that we set forward were really, as I mentioned, that thinking about like future uses and not just kind of meeting the requirements of today, knowing that things are changing so rapidly, both in drone technology altogether, especially as things are facing, battlefield and defense requirements and what's happening in that space. For example, just our Sense technology, as I mentioned, since we released it a year ago, we've overhauled it more than 2 times, just given what the jamming picture is like on the actual battlefields. And we're just working rapidly to keep up pace and again, try to provide a solution that is working today and you can build upon for tomorrow. So again, that is also the multiband feature that I mentioned. We did it at that time because it was a way of starting to then build a foundation that you can then add these future capabilities onto. So for us, we came from that commercial background, but we had always our secret sauce or our background has always been in providing a high performance, low cost solution from our work with commercial that can then be brought forward into federal frequency bands, things like that. And so it was something that actually having very specific requirements given to us by DIU for the defense use case was really great. It gave us a lot of clarity, but it actually allowed us to leverage the technology that we were already developing for our commercial partners.
That's great. And then I guess flash forward from that initial development, groups like PDW choose to use the Doodle Labs solutions for their data link aboard the C-100. I want to loop in Dylan Ham and go on to the next slide as well to ask about the C-100. What's the story behind the development of the platform? What problems is it solving?
Certainly, thanks. Yeah, so the C-100 is PDW's flagship product. This is a multi-mission, high-endurance payload carrying system. So our goals here is to convey to our customers the capability to configure it however they need. So toolless payload swap, we've got multiple payload bays to support ISR type configurations, radio type configurations, as well as our mechanical release device for payload delivery. We chose the Doodle Labs Helix radio because it's a scalable, proven technology, small form factor, and like Amol's been discussing, they iterate on it. So the ability to upgrade the system, increase those capabilities just with a simple firmware update really gives us what we need.
And in terms of the Blue UAS cleared list status, did you have that sort of on your radar as you were developing the product? How did that come to be?
Yeah, so Blue UAS is very important because, again, as Trent was mentioning, that authority to operate, as well as kind of the vetting process, gives those DoD and emergency response or federal customers what they need to make that buying decision. So again, they need that NDAA compliance. They want to have that security confidence. So that stamp of approval that you achieve by going through that process shows that your system lives up to those standards.
Yeah, and Trent detailed with some of those numbers, just the pretty overwhelming response of folks that want to join the list. What would you say has been the value to PDW of joining the Blue UAS cleared list? What, if anything, has changed for your company since achieving that status?
So really, it's access to market. So when you go and engage new customer groups or new customers come to you, that's one of their buying. It's part of their buying criteria. So they need to understand: is this system compliant with what my organization requires of me? And does it convey the confidence that it's going to get the job done? I think that's what the Blue UAS list, Green, and all of those other programs help convey to customers.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah, transitioning over to Matt at Freefly. The newest technology that we have in our presentation today joined the list not too long ago. Can you tell us a little bit about the Astro Prime platform?
Absolutely, Nate. So we've had several variants of Astro available for the last couple of years, but our latest variant is Astro Prime. We've integrated the latest camera technology from Sony. So the Sony LR1 is on board, which is a 61 megapixel color camera. And there's also a bunch of attachment points around that gimbal. So you can add things like a thermal sensor, a laser rangefinder, and many other sensors and tools to that payload. And then it's all connected via Doodle Labs radio to our new controller called Pilot Pro. So it's an incredible platform with interchangeable payloads and a whole bunch of other cool features in there to do a bunch of different applications. So we are really excited to bring this out and work with Doodle on this new variant.
Yeah, I think a unique wrinkle for Freefly especially is just the dual use status, I think, of the platform and of your company. Your company's roots are more in the entertainment business, movie sets and things of that nature. You've obviously moved on to lots of other commercial industrial use cases. From your perspective, do you think drone end users outside of the DoD pay attention to the Blue UAS list as well?
Absolutely, and it's very telling just because of our sales and the trends that we've been seeing. So, not only is DoD using this Blue List as kind of the de facto standard, but also a lot of other groups. So, most of the federal government agencies are now using it, as well as the list of procure systems from, as well as other even state and local government entities, and even down to commercial customers. A lot of industrial customers, infrastructure customers, people with sensitive things, are looking for that extra layer of vetted security.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is that driven mainly by security? Is there a bit of like a stamp of approval? There's a bit of a vibe of like, this is the blue club. There's a lot of people that want to get in. It's a pretty stringent vetting process, and so anyone who kind of goes through the process gets that kind of like quality stamp.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with you there. And there's just never been a clear industry standard for a lot of this, right? And so, all of us drone manufacturers are always trying to use the best practices and update the latest, security. But having gone through the Blue List process is just, again, that, very official confirmation that you are compliant with all those things.
Yeah, on that same thread, thanks, Matt. I wanted to ask you, Dylan. Across the panel, really, there's our companies in general are pretty dual use. So we're very obviously active in the DoD space, but I know PDW is also active in public safety and other spaces. Does sort of like developing technology specifically for DoD help you on the commercial side of things? And I guess maybe I'd also ask the opposite, which is how does, operating in spaces outside the DoD help inform the things that you're making for a program like Blue?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously, there's multiple parts to the answer there. So one of the things that benefits us working in both verticals is basically user experience. So everybody's buying these small unmanned systems for a specific application, whether it's a photogrammetry mission, they're doing surveys, or whether they're doing emergency response. Those user workflows are very similar, whether it's for a DoD application or a non-DoD application. So facilitating those workflows through our user interface is really beneficial for both sides of that.
Same question pretty much for you, Amol. I know Doodle Labs is firmly a component provider, dual use, has customers on both sides of the fence, pretty even split there. How does that reality influence how Doodle Labs approaches developing new products and solutions?
Yeah. Again, what we experienced was really DoD, DIU, this Blue UAS, like all of those as those set requirements for us towards defense. And then even actually hearing from customers that are defense focused like PDW, we're seeing some of those most exacting standards, most sometimes extreme requirements, needing just even encryption up to FIPS 140-3, which we have certified. Those are some of the extreme levels of what our radios need to be capable of to meet those requirements. But then they actually really do trickle down to commercial use cases as well. And there's actually a lot of challenges on the commercial side that are different. Maybe you don't need that level of encryption, but you need to operate in unlicensed frequency bands in urban environments where you're just facing a lot of interference. And so what we actually see is development for us. We look at how that gets to solve problems or solve those types of technical issues across the board. I mentioned sense, I mentioned that interference agility. It's been working really well in a anti-jamming capability on the battlefield today. That same feature, though, is working to actually help improve performance for those commercial applications in urban environments, because interference is what's really the problem there. And interference agility, or being able to move away from that, is what sense is doing. Jamming is intentional interference being caused by an aggressor, versus the other is passive interference from thousands of Wi-Fi devices operating on the same band. And so for us, we look at how we can improve that performance across the board. But what we actually see is they're often facing very similar challenges from two different perspectives. So that's for us, it's actually been something that it's helped improve the technology across the board. It's same features being used, but kind of combating different reasons or different things that they're dealing with.
Yeah, Matt, I want to ask you about that for Freefly specifically. What do you see and what do you hear from end users as are the kind of key connectivity challenges facing UAS operators within the DoD or even outside?
Yeah, I mean, there's a wide range of challenges they have, right? And there's no one size fits all solution. So that's why it's incredible working with you guys at Doodle Labs, because you have these various offerings depending on what those needs are. And it's very easy to kind of move between them. So, like a lot of our customers, frankly, are commercial customers, and that's kind of where we got started. So we were always focused on the best price to performance item out there that we could incorporate into our platforms. And so that was, a huge decision factor in looking at Doodle Labs. And we looked at all the other radio manufacturers out there that we were, thought worth evaluating. And Doodle Labs bubbled up to the top, time and time again on all our key metrics.
Yeah, Dylan, I think on the topic of interference, jamming has been a really big, just hot topic for a long time within the DoD, but we also have customers that are operating in the battlefields of Ukraine. It's the number one kind of threat out there. What are the is that near the top of the list for what you're hearing from your customers in terms of challenges, or what are the biggest problems that we're trying to address in the battlefield at the moment?
Also, there's a bunch of parts to that. There's the battlefield challenges, obviously, where you're operating in the contested environment where somebody's actively trying to deny or degrade your link. DoodleSense works great for that, as y'all have proven on various platforms. But also in terms of frequency agility, the virtue really is your flexibility to work interoperably with other systems. So for defense applications, there's those group 3 platforms, group 2, group 1. If those are all coordinating together, they need to be operating on different frequencies. So the ability to select, we've got 21 channels you can select within M1 through M6. The ability to select a range within those, deconflict internally, offers a tremendous amount of mission agility to the customers.
Yeah, perfect segue to my next question. For Trent, I wanted to circle back on the test event around the Blue UAS Refresh. So you gave us a little bit of a primer. There was a flood of interest of people applying to try to join the Blue cleared list or be considered for it. There's a committee that's going to do a down select to select who you want to invite out to this test event. I will say, just from my perspective, I think trade shows are great. It's great to see people in person. There's always cool demos that happen on the side. There's demos happening all the time, one-offs within various branches of the DoD all the time. The demo for this sounds pretty unique, though. I'm kind of handing a lot of this technology just off to DoD end users and expecting some like smooth interoperation between them as kind of like a baseline. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're expecting from that event and kind of what you most look forward to seeing in action?
Yeah, so one of the things we knew we needed to address at the test event was DoD end users providing that hands-on feedback. So in the same way that DoD end users are providing the evaluations on company proposals now, they're going to be the ones coming and actually flying the platforms. Now, I want to caveat, there's some platforms, they're not going to be able to pick up and fly, but a requirement that we laid in the solicitation was companies needed to provide training materials ahead of time. And I want to also differentiate. We're going to have flying platforms come, but we're also going to have components and capabilities from our framework come. And they're going to have to mesh together. So that's one of our requirements is interoperability. How easy is it? Now, there's always some kinks you got to work out, and we understand that. But we want to make it as simple as unplug, plug in the new thing, and then it goes and has a different capability to fly. But what is the test event going to look like? Well, the end user operators who are coming have a range of experience, from brand new operators to very experienced folks who've been doing this for 10 to 15 years, from every branch of the service, from SOCOM, from traditional Army and Marine Corps, Navy, and Air Force as well. We want that because those are the folks who are going to be operating this thing. And this is not meant to be a dig at companies, but I've seen companies do demos and their test pilots and the demo flights. Like, it's phenomenal. Like, they can do some great things. And then it gets in the hands of, a typical end user in DoD, and they can't quite do the same things. So we want to try and get to the truth of what capabilities are going to be unlocked and unleashed. And then, asking about the test event itself, one of the things that we're going to do is provide just a realistic real world scenario. So we have FPVs, group 1, group 2, group 3 platforms, but within those, there's ISR, there's cargo, there's fixed wing, there's rotary wing. So there's not going to be any one specific thing. platforms and capabilities are going to be tested according to their unique things that they bring so that we get a good sense of that feedback. And the operators, to the very maximum extent possible, are going to be the ones flying the platforms and then giving the feedback. That's what we will use when we make our final down select decisions there.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, that interoperability, really jives in lockstep with other groups like the U.S. Army and their kind of common operating picture with SRR and MRR and all the rest. Trent, from your perspective, what do you think are the biggest hurdles to really like achieving that true interoperability among different UAS systems, but also even other technologies deployed within the DoD, and how can those obstacles potentially be addressed?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nate. So number one, I think anytime there is an industry developed solution where commonality is achieved, that's what we want. And I use the example of a Wi-Fi router. You can go anywhere in the world and log on to a Wi-Fi router. Some are better than others. Some have more capability, like can mesh. But a core functionality is I log onto the network and I can communicate. That's what we want to get to. And that's an industry-led, industry-developed standard. What we know doesn't work, and this is not something DIU is going to push. It's not something the Blue team is going to push, a government-directed solution. Maybe somebody can point to one that's ever worked in the world, but we don't see it. And that, unfortunately, is the traditional DoD answer. There is a top-down direction of, here's our 40-page requirement document, and the technical specifications are required. We don't think that works in the real world. We certainly don't think it works in a software-driven, software-defined world where we have to react as quickly as we do today. So we're trying to lay the requirement of modularity and interoperability, and then allow companies to solve that as best they can. I realize that's hard. We're not talking about something that's easy, but the ability to get there, we know can be done. And that's one of the things that we're going to be evaluating on as well, is how is it done? How easy is it done? We do not want proprietary walled-off solutions. That's just not something DoD wants. It's not something we need, and we're not going to accept those. But again, what is interoperability? What is modularity? Those are all different things. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure our intent is conveyed clearly. It needs to be simple and easy for the end user, so that DoD warfighter, to do what they need with the platform, with the capabilities they want, very easily.
Yeah, on that same note, looping Matt back in, can you, we're talking a lot about interoperability, interplay. You mentioned like the swappable modularity of the Prime platform and your approach to that. Can you give some examples of how Freefly is engaged with either other drone manufacturers or component providers in sort of a multi-domain setting, military or otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. So Freefly has been a huge proponent of interoperability for a long time. So whether you want to change out your payload, change out your battery, change out your radio, change out your ground control station, change out the software that you're using to operate all of that, we've taken a very open stance to having that architecture available and customizable to the operator's preferences. So this is something that's we've had built into our systems and kind of company ethos for a long time, and it's really inspiring to see the DIU team open up the framework part of the Blue List, right? Because the Blue List got a bunch of airframes on and got those vetted and approved, but there was still a little bit of a rub with me in that those configurations were locked, and that was again kind of an antiquated thing from previous DoD processes. And Trent and team, did a huge lift there to open up the framework components. So now any of those components on the framework can be swapped interchangeably between not only our own Freefly Systems Astro, but PDW or anybody else on that list, and we can all share payloads and GCSs and radios, etc. And so I think that is one of the biggest value adds that's come out of this whole program to really move the whole DoD forward towards that more commercial-like process.
Nate, one thing I would add to Matt's comment. So these are the things we hear from our industry partners and from our DoD end users. So when there's a solution or a problem identified, we want to act on it. What Matt's talking about is these were policy problems based off policy documents we had to follow, but that we've been able to fix. And it takes time. We don't do it nearly as fast as I want, certainly not as fast as any of our partners do, but we've done it. Then one of the next things we're going to do, and I think it relates to something I think Dylan and Amal brought up earlier, how do you do updates to your platforms? Well, today the requirement is a nightmare, frankly, for a DoD end user to produce a software update or take a software update and apply it to the platform. So the next thing that we are working on is providing the ability to do some sort of an over-the-air update, whether that's via Wi-Fi or some other means. That's the next thing we want, because that's also going to break down barriers and make it simpler for you to get your software updates out and for end users to apply them. So they're not having to use a thumb drive or hook up to some 1995 era laptop. But just as an example, those are things we hear. And when we hear that feedback, we do try and go act on it.
Yeah, Amol, on this front, we're kind of already showing our cards by having this webinar. Our radios in multiple platforms here, but can you kind of answer the same question about, what are some of the collaborations and interoperability that we've demonstrated as a company at Doodle Labs?
Yeah. So, it's on a couple fronts because, again, our radios go into platforms such as the Astro Prime and the C100. And that's just where we get to see those incredible use cases. I wish everyone could see what we've gotten to see with these platforms in the field. They're so optimized towards what they're doing. Like, we got to join Freefly for an event with the Department of Interior, U.S. Forest Service. They did an incredible event up at the Sequoia National Park. And just to be able to see this platform being used in the field, again, as Matt was mentioning, payloads, like they were able to swap out so many different payloads from high definition camera to a multispectral camera to LiDAR scanning in a matter of, seconds, minutes kind of thing on the payloads. But then they were up and flying again, doing some really cool scanning of these use cases that are going to be really important for Department of Interior for inspection and scanning. And then with the C100, I've gotten to see them with some demos, but I always say one of the things I wish everyone could hear is just how quiet that platform is. It's incredible. That's going to be very effective in the way that they're deploying it. But all across the board, PDW is really on the front lines of developing use cases, platforms for the warfighter. And so then we get to see that kind of thing with how our radio is being brought to the field. What's a step behind that? Those platforms are ready. They're in the field now. Are the platforms in development? We're really looking for easy integration. That's what we design into our radios themselves. But then working with ecosystem partners, Blue UAS framework partners like Auterion, Skynode, Modal AI's Voxel 2. There's a whole host of them that we've done pre-integration work with to make it easier for our all types of platforms to integrate these types of combined solutions and get to market faster. Ultimately, we're all trying to design tools for specific problems. These drone systems are those finished tools that end users are trying to take and do really important work with them. So helping however we can, doing this pre-integration work, making it easier to bring these platforms to reality and start doing the jobs that they're designed to do. That's what we see, integration helping us do, and how we've seen that borne out since we've been part of the program. You're on mute.
Thanks, Mal. We have some really good questions coming in. So I have one more question I want to pose specifically to Dylan, Matt, and Amol in that order, and then we can get to some questions after. So obviously the topic here, DIU really making a push to potentially welcome new technology into the cleared list with the refresh effort. General interest in the program seems to be growing, I would say, considering the big response to the refresh effort. There's a bunch of other kind of like parallel items floating around in the news. There's always the sort of potential Chinese drone ban. A broader ban is a hot topic each time NDA is up for revision, renewal in Congress. To you first, Dylan, what do you think these developments kind of say about the direction of the broader drone industry? And how do you think PDW's positioned to respond to these types of changes, potential changes?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And there's been some dynamic changes this year as well. Like things will just change on a dime in terms of commerce, and you no longer have access to certain vendors or certain types of components. But really, it's all for the best, because ultimately what we're trying to do is have that robust supply chain with trusted vendors that we're integrating into these systems. Because again, these are highly complex robotic systems, and we want to make sure that what we're putting in there is not only good today, but is going to be an item that we can procure and source for years to come. because our customers are buying for multiple year buy cycles, whether it's an Astro or a C100, they expect these systems to perform for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, Matt, you already mentioned earlier that you have customers that are in municipal groups, state level groups. They're not subject to NDAA, but they're still coming to you asking for solutions in that space. Is that a trend you see continuing?
Absolutely. I see it continuing and only increasing, frankly. So, I think it's really important that we take a hard look at these supply chains and vet them and make sure that we're making good long-term decisions. Because like Dylan said, we're trying to make these aircraft last for many, many years. And, there's thousands of our systems out there fielded, and we want to make sure that those systems can continue to fly safely and in compliance.
Yeah, well, I know NDA compliance is a big deal across the board. How do you think Doodle Labs is sort of positioned if and when, unknown changes do come down the pike around the corner?
Yeah, so again, we're staying close to those NDA requirements. Our solution is NDA compliant today, and that's actually why that was exactly what we designed the platform around, being able to provide a solution to US-based drone manufacturers, as well as robotics manufacturers who are focused on supplying to end customers in federal government agencies, domestic agencies, as well as into defense that is deploying internationally. For us, that's just staying on top of those requirements if and how they change. But I think if that ban were to come tomorrow type of thing, I think there's a lot of great platforms that are really set up already to kind of fill that space for enterprise drones for those use cases. And it would be a big sea change, but I think a lot of people have been kind of seeing and reading the tea leaves, and if that happens, I think people are set up for it.
Yeah, it's a good segue, I think, into a couple of these questions that have come across. It seems like we maybe hit a nerve or just a hot topic here around NDA compliance. I think this is going to be a good Trent question, I think. NDA compliance doesn't directly mean Blue certified, obviously, but does it work the opposite way? Is everything on the Blue list like fully NDA compliant in terms of at a component level?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 3 pieces of relevant legislation that DIU follows. The 2020 NDA, the 2023 NDA, sections 848 and 817 from those, and the 2024 American Security Drone Act. Those provide the boundaries on components we have to look at and what we need to look at when we examine them. Essentially, does it come from a country that's prohibited under the law? For all intents and purposes, that's China, but there's a few others on the list. Is it made in a Chinese-owned facility by a Chinese-owned company, or Russian or North Korean? Those are things that we have to do. It is not possible to be on the Blue list if your components that are covered under the law are not compliant with the law. That's why we do a physical teardown of our platforms to look at serial numbers, individual components, and see, does it comply? And so the flip side is, just because you're NDA compliant, does that mean you're Blue? No. You have to go through our certification process. And 2 points I want to make about that. Number one, the supply chain in this area is tough. It's nebulous, it's murky, and we've discovered companies that certainly thought they had NDA compliant parts, but it turned out that as you traced it back, they actually weren't. They acted in good faith. They thought their supply chain was good, and it wasn't. So there is a difference between a self-certification and then an actually verified and validated one, which is why DIU and AUVSI, when we do our blue and green inspections, that is something you can trust. And then, the other piece is, what is the Blue list kind of in general? Well, it's a direction of it's a result of congressional direction, policy memos signed by the Deputy Secretary of Defense. And those are the things that we operate on, law and policy. That is our guiding principles. As those change, we will update and change what we do. The law is almost certainly going to change again, become likely more restrictive. I certainly don't know what Congress is going to do, but I think it's a safe bet that we will see more legislation in this space over the next couple of years. When that comes, we will respond and we'll do what we need to do.
Kind of a piggyback question here, and again, I'm bypassing any under the table favor is being asked. It's not really happening, but that's fine. Trent, is for the Blue program, is the intent to, especially with this invitation for like a big flood of applications for the refresh, is it to bring in really as many products that meet all those strict requirements there and have the list just continually grow as long as these platforms and components meet the criteria? Can we project it to continue to grow going forward?
So we will see the framework continue to grow. Will it grow at the pace it has over the past 6 months? No, because we took it from 5 components to, I think at last count, we're over 80. We had a large initial growth. We're going to continue that, but it's going to become more moderate. Over time, some of those things are going to roll off. It's just natural. A 4-year-old product that's not selling anymore is going to come off, and new things will come on, but the framework will continue to expand. Do we have a set number of caps on the Blue UAS list, though, for our flying platforms? We don't. However, we operate under fiscal and manpower constraints. There's a team of 3 at DIU, myself, and 2 other folks. That's it to run the entire Blue program. So we can't go too much. We don't have the money. But also at a certain level, and again, I recognize that Blue is a seal of approval in the marketplace, and it unlocks commercial doors for companies. But we need to provide solutions to DoD, and giving them too many is almost as bad as not giving them enough. Part of the benefit comes from scale, simplified logistics chains, simplified operator training. And so we want to make sure that we have ideally at least 2 good options in each particular market segment that we identify. And that's why we're expanding to FPVs, Group 3, because within those, even Group 1, there's still multiple market segments that need to be addressed, different capability sets. And so in the overlapping circles of range, payload, capacity, et cetera, we want to provide multiple options, but we don't want to give you 20. We want to give you ideally at least 2. And that's because we're balancing our fiscal and manpower constraints against end user needs and demands. We can't do too much. We're certainly trying to do more than we've done in the past. But one of the other things about the refresh is we are going to provide this as of now on a yearly basis and give companies the chance to compete to gain entry. Companies that are on it are going to have to compete to stay on. So that's just a market-based competition. Just like going to the grocery store, if your product sells and is good, people are going to buy more of it. If your product doesn't sell, it's going to come off the shelf. And at the end of the day, we think that's a better process because capitalism drives a market economy, which drives better results that we have to have for that 19-year-old kid. We're passionate about that because we believe that the face of warfare has changed in a way with drones that nothing since the machine gun has done. And if we send those kids to war, we don't want that, God forbid. But if we are called to go fight and we haven't equipped them with the right capabilities and the quantities they need, they're going to pay the price in blood. So our duty and what we work to every day is give them the very best that they have, that they need to train and survive in combat. To get there, we work with our commercial partners. We try and provide on-ramps, but at the end of the day, we do have constraints.
It's a good segue into, I want to make sure to give each panelist a chance to kind of give some of the future forward projections. So Trent, I'll start with you off the back of that. Painted a good picture, I think, of how DIU and the Blue program are kind of positioned to future-proof there. Can you go out on any limb to make any projections or predictions yourself about the next few years of just the use of UAS technology in the DoD or in the drone industry as a whole? What do you see coming around the corner?
So I believe we are in a software-defined space. Software is going to define success in what we do. You have to have a baseline hardware capability that enables everything else, but it's what you do with that capability that's going to show you how successful you are. What do we see DoD doing? I think we see that DoD as a whole is continuing to grapple with the space. To be successful, you have to change and adapt. Because Dylan and Matt and Amol can share the products that they have today. If you compare them to what they were offering 2 years ago, it's just going to be night and day difference. The quality is going to be better. The cost is likely going to be lower. It's going to be more intuitive. It's like going from, the old flip phones, if you're old enough like me to remember back in the early 2000s, like you open it up by doing this, to the iPhone. gigantic leaps. DoD is not capable of doing that today. Program of record timeframes don't allow that, but they continue to grapple with the problem and work towards finding a solution. So we're not there yet. That's what DIU is trying to help with. We're trying to provide that commercial pathway and the on-ramp to actual fast commercial technology improvements and increases in capability. Where that goes, how that pans out, I don't know. One of the things that will really come into play is money. Units today buy these platforms with unit funds, which are very limited, but they're making that choice to do that. Are units going to be funded to buy what they want and need, or is it going to continue to come through a program of record that may have a delivery time frame 3 to 4 years from now? We want it to change. We want units to be able to buy and get what they need. We think that's a good solution, but it's hard because it takes money, budgeting. There's a lot that goes into it that I don't want to oversee.
Thanks for that, Trent. And yeah, I can assure you, you're not the only one who had the same hole worn in every pair of jeans from the antenna sticking out of the flip phone for all of this year. So I don't want to look back on that too fondly. Anyway, Matt, similar question to you, twofold. What can we expect new and different sort of around the corner for Freefly, but also any predictions or projections you can make about the drone market?
Sure. So Freefly, we had our Freefly Fest, which is kind of our annual demo day 2 weeks ago, and we showed off a bunch of new payloads, software capabilities, et cetera. But we had a bunch of our partners out there as well. And so it was really kind of inspiring to see what everybody else is working on and how we can inject some of that into our aircraft and into our platform. So kind of echoing what Trent said, I think software is going to really kind of define the space and become increasingly important. So we're doing things like, adding additional compute to have more horsepower on board to run all of that software and do those fancy algorithms and things that people are asking for. So I think that you'll see that be as a big trend. You'll see a ton, kind of expanding on that interoperability, a lot more payloads, more radio options, more everything. So really looking through the entire system and just trying to optimize everywhere possible. And again, I think you'll kind of see at a larger macro trend across the industry, platforms being designed for very specific applications. It's kind of been this one size fits all kind of concept where we've tried to shove these platforms into different applications where they don't always make sense just because that's what's available. But I think as people really understand the needs and the requirements for specific applications, you'll see the hardware and software really be more specific to that.
That's great. And Dylan, what are you excited about at PDW, and what do you see coming around the corner?
It's all very exciting. And what's funny is that a lot of the initiatives that DIU is pushing they're actually working. And it's funny for me to say that coming from a DoD background is that usually you fight the system all the way. But things like the framework, they actually reduce the pain point for us to integrate. What that does for us by vetting that subsystem component that we're evaluating. Maybe we're looking at 5 subsystem components and 2 of them make the framework. And that helps us to understand which one we want to integrate. From there, it frees our team up to then focus on those features and the utility applications that our customers need. Because ultimately our customers have missions they're trying to get done. And our job is to facilitate that with our platform, with our software, with third-party software, and with all those subsystems.
Dylan, I would say we are fighting the system every single day. It's not easy. We are literally beating our heads against the wall. But with the global ATO, that took a year. Literally. Every day we're working on it, and we finally solved it. So it's not easy, but we're getting
progress. Yeah.
Amol, final word from you on advancements at Doodle Labs and just to projections for the market in general.
Yeah, from our roadmap side, again, we develop all of our roadmap taking in customer feedback. It's requirements coming from partners like Freefly and PDW. One of the things that, Trent's mentioned a couple of times as well of including FPV drones onto the framework. I mean, we all hear the news, we see the news that FPV drones are being used in such a unique and different set of ways than just the drone racing days. It requires a unique set of requirements as well. It has to be incredibly low cost, has to be really capable, especially if you're looking at advancing those types of data, links from an analog link to a digital data link. So we have been working on a solution for that we call Nimble, something that would be incredibly low cost while maintaining some of those core functionality that we have in our Mesh Rider platform, including that anti-jamming capability. We also are seeing now on the battlefield a lot of just the anti-jamming picture and the EW that those drone systems are facing. And so we're also developing a dual radio solution, which is taking basically two of our radios, optimizing the form factor, but allowing you to actually have two independent radios operating where you can have redundancy, or you can use it for spoofing while you're using one as the primary data link. There's a lot of functionality that can come along with that. So we're taking in those types of requirements. We continuously iterate on our Sense capability altogether, which is a software feature actually adding on top of our hardware, echoing what everyone else has been saying in terms of the future. So that's how we're addressing some of the immediate roadmap in terms of what we're seeing the drone industry going into. But it's also leveling that up into the drone space. I've definitely witnessed over the last 5 years, but especially looking at this past year or so, the industry has matured. It's really gone leaps and bounds forward in terms of what we're seeing. Our partners that we're working with, they moved from, everyone's been iterating, and I remember looking at the space at some of the actually AUV size exponential a few years ago, and kind of you wonder, is that robotics future in terms of drones really going to materialize? It's happening now, and our partners are talking about production at scale, deployment at scale, and the challenges that come along with that. What that also unlocks, I think, is we're seeing those use cases of drones and battlefield use cases, but on the commercial side of things, I feel like every day I'm seeing like a new, unique, creative use case for drones in the enterprise use cases, in terms of industry use cases. And so it seems like we're really at that kind of like beginning of the hockey stick in terms of seeing these types of robotic systems. Again, they're tools, they have important jobs to do, but what those are going to be, like, I think we're starting to see that future happen, but there's a lot to see.
Yeah, we're definitely all excited to see all the new drone technology and developments coming into the space. Looking forward to seeing the Blue UAS Refresh Challenge continue to progress and see what comes, especially from that test event. So just want to say thanks again to all of our panelists from PDW, Freefly Systems, and DIU. Thanks to AUVSI for hosting the webinar. For more info on Blue UAS, the companies, products, and technology that you saw in today's webinar, please feel free to visit doodlelabs.com. From all of us at Doodle Labs, thanks so much for watching.